Hey everybody, we're going to start our notes on the second day of Voronoi Diagrams. So if you are watching this and you have not contributed to that discussion board yet, if you have not watched that video on how they are constructed, please start that before we go into this. We are not going to construct full Voronoi diagrams, but we do need to understand that they are created by midpoints between 2 points and then drawing a perpendicular bisector between them. So for those of you all who have your books, we're going to be out of the orange book here today. And I'm going to be pulling from some examples in there. So if you want to follow along or if you want a graph that's not the graphs that I have made, that is perfectly fine. So what we're going to look at today with Voronoi is if we put a new site in, how to construct or reconstruct your Voronoi diagram to do that. So a good rule of thumb is for Voronoi, if we need to separate sites, we're going to construct a perpendicular bisector. So that's a perpendicular line that goes through the midpoint between 2 points. So the best practice here is to draw dotted lines for edges. I would recommend doing these notes in pencil. You're going to need an eraser because especially when you start putting in a new location to represent a hospital or a fire station or just whatever type of store, you're going to have to redraw your diagram. So I would recommend those of you all who normally do these in pen to do these in pencil. So we're going to start with this diagram right here. So if you look, we've got 4 sites here. We've got A, we've got B, we've got C, and we've got D, but it's an incomplete Voronoi diagram. So the first thing that we're going to try to do is recognize, okay, well, where are we missing a perpendicular bisector from? So I want you all to look at that real quick and say, okay, where am I missing my edge from? And so looking at it, you can pause it if you want to think to yourself. We're missing a perpendicular bisector between B and between C here, between B and C. So we're going to have to put some kind of edge, some kind of perpendicular bisector in between them. So what we need to figure that out, to get the perpendicular bisector here, the first thing we need is the midpoint. So to get the midpoint, we're just going to add the x coordinates together. So this x coordinate is -2. We're going to add that to the x coordinate here, which is 2. So -2 plus 2, we're going to divide that by 2. That's how you find a midpoint. And then for the y coordinate, we're going to add the y's. So 1 and 3, 1 plus 3 over 2. So then a little bit of quick maths, as the kids would say. 0, 2 is our midpoint. So we can go ahead and plot that midpoint here. 0, up 2. There we are. You can graphically confirm it's the midpoint. Up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. And so now what we need to do after that is we need to calculate what the slope of this is going to be, of our perpendicular one. So if we're going to get the slope of BC, you can either do that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I prefer just to count, so 1, 2, especially if it's on a graph. 1, 2, so it's up 2 over 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to be 2 over 4, which is 1/2. So the perpendicular slope here, the M with the little perpendicular slope here, is going to be the flip of that and then the negative reciprocal. So it's going to be -2. So now that we've got this midpoint, we're going to go through it. So we're going to go up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, and then connect those. And so that is the missing piece right there for that Voronoi diagram. And so now anything in this area is closer to B. Anything in this area is closer to C. Anything on this edge is equidistant to B and to C. So we're going to look at a few more today, but this is the gist of what we're doing. We're not constructing whole ones. We're just modifying them. So let's see here. The next problem that we're going to look at if you've got your book, is we're going to look at the opening problem on page 427. And so this Voronoi diagram shows hospitals A, B, and C in a city. A, B, and C in a city. So this is a hospital, this is a hospital, this is a hospital. And they're like, you know what? We want to put a new hospital in here. So a new hospital is site D right here. And what we want to do is say, well, now that we have a new hospital here, we've got to make a modification to this Voronoi diagram, because what we have now done is D and B are in the exact same spot, but each site has to have its own cell. So the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to construct a perpendicular bisector between B and D here. So what we've got to do that, so let's see, we're going to do a perpendicular bisector of BD. This is just some notation that we need to familiarize ourselves with, the perpendicular bisector of BD. So we've got to get the midpoint first. So let's see, the x coordinates for B is 2. The x coordinate for C is, or for D, excuse me, is 4. We're going to divide that by 2. And then we're going to do the same thing. So y coordinate here is 0. Y coordinate here is 4. So 0 plus 4. I'm writing on tape. From where I taped that, I could not see it. I'm going to put the y coordinate down here. I apologize about that, you all. Don't be like Mr. Price. Give yourself enough room. So the midpoint here is going to be 2 plus 4 is 3, or 6 divided by 2 is 3. And that's going to get, the y coordinate's going to be 2. So the midpoint that we're going to plot here is going to be 3. We're going to go up to 2. And then we've got to get the slope here. So the slope of BD here. If you're taking this on an IB exam, they're going to want to see your work for finding the slope. So actually doing the subtraction of the coordinates. I don't know that they will be all right with having you do the shortcut way. So on this one, we are going to not do the shortcut way. So let's see, the coordinates here are 0, or 2, 0, excuse me, and 4, 4. So the slope there, we're going to do y2 minus y1, which is 0, over x2 minus x1. So we're going to get 4 over 2, which is the equivalent of 2. So then the perpendicular slope is going to be negative 1/2. So now that we know that's negative 1/2, we can go to our midpoint here that we just drew, and we can say, okay, we're going to go down 1, right 2, up 1, right 2. And we can draw that Voronoi diagram. It's going to keep going in that direction. Now, what happens as well, when we put D there, all of a sudden this bisector that we've got right here is measuring the distance between A and B here. Because where this wasn't here before, what we're measuring now, we've got to rewrite this part of the Voronoi for A and D, because putting D in there makes us have to create an area here, as well as we're going to have to create an area between here for the perpendicular bisector. So we're got to do 2 of these. So the midpoint of A and D, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If they're straight away like that, they're pretty easy to calculate. But we'll do the math just to make sure. So the perpendicular bisector of AD, let's see here. The midpoint, we're going to do negative 2 plus 4 over 2. For the y coordinate here, we're going to do 4 plus 4 over 2. And that's going to give us a midpoint of what, 1, 4. So I'm going to plot that midpoint. 1, 2, 3, right there. And so now we've got to figure out the slope here. So if the slope from A to D is horizontal, the perpendicular slope, what will make a right angle with horizontal slope, is vertical slope, which is undefined slope. So the perpendicular slope here is undefined. So what we've got to do now is we've got to draw this new Voronoi coming out of here. So it's just a straight line here that's going to continue. I'm going on tape right now, so that's why that's a little choppy. And what you notice here, we've still got this little bit from this. This was the perpendicular bisector for A and B. And so now we're in a situation where this is cutting into D's area. We're going to have to actually erase this. This is why I told you to bring erasers, because we're revising that Voronoi diagram. So we no longer need the AB perpendicular bisector once it starts getting into the areas of the other one. Because if I picked a point here, it's not going to be closer to A, it's going to be closer to D, because we just built that new hospital there. And so this is a real issue that when you're building new facilities in a town, you need to make sure that you're revising the areas that you're serving. Because if you're going to put a new location somewhere, you may have to reconsider who you are serving. So we're going to look at one more example of a Voronoi diagram. So we just added a new site. That's, if you wanted to put words to what we just did, that's what it would be. There's a lot of perpendicular bisector to it, a lot of midpoint to it. And if you think that that was a lot, just wait for this next one. So the last one that we're going to look at is the original Voronoi diagram here. So this is from example 5 and page 428. The original Voronoi diagram was what I've got drawn here in pencil. This blue pen's the axes. So where all of these things, so it was just A, B, C, and D. And so what we've done is we've put E into this equation now, and we want to go ahead and start redrawing this Voronoi, because sometimes it's as easy as having to redraw a couple sites, and then sometimes it'll be as complicated as what we're about to have to do. So whenever you're looking at this, whenever we put E in, you have to ask yourself, okay, what does that directly affect off the get-go? Whose area is E impeding on? So E is impeding on D right here. These two are now in the same cell, this cell right here. And so now what we've got to worry about is reconstructing this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find the perpendicular bisector. So P, or I guess I can go out of order there, PB of DE. So we need the midpoint. So we're going to do, let's see, I'm going to be tight on room over here for this example. It'll be all good though. So we're going to do the midpoint. So that's going to be -4. Let's see here. I'm getting confused on my axes over here. -2 over 2. And then the other midpoint, we're going to do -1 plus 1 over 2. So then that's going to give us a midpoint of -3. Yeah, that's good. I don't know why that was such a struggle for me. And 0, so the midpoint is right there. So then we have to look at the slope of this. So the slope here is, let's see, I'm gonna eyeball this one. We go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So the slope, the M of DE, is 1, which means that the perpendicular slope is going to be -1. So through this midpoint here, we're going to go up 1, left 1, up 1, left 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1. And there is a new edge for this Voronoi diagram. We basically created a right triangle there. But now we've got an issue here. Because if you look here, there's not this perpendicular bisector. E's messing everything up. Because A and E now, like the midpoint for A and E, if you're looking at it graphically, would be like here. And this is not a perpendicular bisector for A and E. So we've got to go ahead and draw a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this edge because this isn't going to cut it. So I'm going to keep this far part, but I'm going to erase because we need a new one for A and E. So now we're going to do let me draw a line here. We're going to do the perpendicular bisector for A and E. So with that perpendicular bisector, first thing we got to do is find the midpoint. So this one, I'm just going to say we can eyeball it because it's up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. So the coordinate right here, we'll do a little bit of everything here, is going to be what? -3, and then that's up 3. So the midpoint is -3, 3. And if we look at the slope here, it's, you know what, we'll do the actual slope here for A and E. We need a good mix of both. So the y coordinates, if we subtract those, we're going to get, that's a y coordinate of 5 minus 1. And then if we subtract the x coordinates, that would be -3 plus 1. So we're going to get 4 over -2, which is the same as -2. So for AE, that perpendicular slope is going to be what, 1/2? That's the flip of that, the opposite reciprocal. So now we've got the midpoint. We've got it. We're going to say, okay, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. And that's going to run into that, down 1 over 2. And we've got this line right here. Oh shoot, I can't see my axis. So it's gonna stop. It's gonna stop here. So now we're done, right? There's nothing else that we've got to do. There's nothing else that putting E in is messed up. You're probably thinking to yourself, Mr. Price, it's probably not that easy. We've got a little bit more to do because now we have to make sure that E and C have a perpendicular bisector here. That works. So as of right now, this is the perpendicular bisector that was constructed for D and E. We don't have one for C and E. So we're going to have to construct one. So the perpendicular bisector for C and E. Onward and upward we go, Tate's Creek. Let's see here. So the midpoint of C and E, let's see those coordinates. We're going to do -2 plus 2 over 2. We're going to do 1 plus -1 over 2. Oh, I'm going into the tape. Dang it. It's so hard for me to see it. So that's going to give us a midpoint. So midpoint of 0, 0. That pesky tape. I'm going to have to start over further left. Excuse me, you all. So we're just going to say midpoint of 0, 0. So that would be here. And that looks good. So I'm going to eyeball this slope. I'd like for us to get in the habit of both. So to get from E to C, we go right 1, 2, 3, 4. We go down 1, 2. So the slope of EC is down 2, so -2. And then to the right 4. So that means that the perpendicular slope here is going to be, so that's what, -1/2. So the perpendicular slope is going to be the flip of that, which is going to be 2. So this coordinate right here, we're going through with the slope of 2. So we're going down 1 over 2, connect that, over 1 up 2. Now, you all see how we've got this Voronoi inside of here, this former edge. This doesn't work anymore because what used to be the perpendicular bisector for C and D, that's all getting changed. So I'm going to have to erase that inside right there because that perpendicular bisector is running into E's area now. So we're almost done here. The last thing that we've got to do is we haven't constructed one for E and B here yet. So once we do that, we're good to go, because putting in a new location is going to affect every other location, unfortunately. But you know what? We will be all right. I think this is pretty cool stuff. I know y'all are saying, yeah, it is, Mr. Price. This is incredibly cool. So I'm going to eyeball this midpoint. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'd be up 2, over 2, away. So that midpoint is going to be at the coordinate, what, 0, 3? I think it's good to do a little bit of eyeballing sometimes. And sometimes it's good to calculate stuff. So then, let's see. The slope from E to B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that looks like a slope of 1 to me. So the measure, or the slope, excuse me, of BE is 1. So what that means is that the perpendicular slope is -1. So for this midpoint that we've plotted right here, we're going to go up 1, left 1. We're going to go down 1, right 1. And we're going to draw the rest of this for the rest of this Voronoi for E. So it's kind of a trapezoid, right? It looks like a trapezoid a good bit. So what we've got to make sure now is, first off, erase any stray of the former edges in here, because this trapezoid represents the even, and any point in here is closest to E. We've got to keep these outside form, like this right here is the perpendicular bisector for A and B. This right here is still going to chill here because this is the perpendicular bisector for BC now. This one over here is the one for D and E. And this one out here is the perpendicular bisector for A and D. So I know that is a lot of perpendicular bisector. I know that is a lot of midpoint. And all that we're really doing at the end of the day is that if we put in a new site, we're just redrawing what we need to do. You all have shown me you all can find midpoint. You all have shown me you all can do perpendicular bisector. It is a lot to follow, but I'm confident that we can do it. So if you all have any questions on the notes, feel free to ask me. If you have any questions on the homework, when it's your all's time to run the show, you all let me know. But thanks, y'all. I'll see you.